Dear viewer, thank you for joining us. You're watching Dalsan TV. My name is Ifrah Noor and this is the English News Bulletin. The regional presidents of Puntland and Jubaland, Said Abdullahi Deni and Ahmed Mohamed Islam, also known as Ahmed Madobe, are in Mogadishu for talks with federal leaders. The discussions follow months of political tension, including disputes over election arrangements and a recent security standoff that delayed earlier engagement. Since arriving in the capital last evening, the two leaders have already begun meeting senior officials and political stakeholders. Our reporter Mohamed Saido with more on this story.
The arrival of Puntland Regional President Said Abdullahi Deni and Jubaland Regional President Ahmed Mohamed Islam Madobe marks a renewed attempt to break a prolonged political deadlock. Relations between the federal government and the two states have been strained for months, with disagreement resurfacing in December and escalating again in recent weeks. A security dispute earlier this month delayed their participation in talks, deepening mistrust between the sides. Since arriving in Mogadishu last evening, both leaders have begun meetings with federal officials and political figures as discussions focus on elections, constitutional amendments, and the future of federal-state relations.
Somalia has signed a military cooperation agreement with Saudi Arabia, marking a significant step in strengthening defense relations between the two countries. The agreement focuses on expanding cooperation between the armed forces, including support, coordination, and capacity building. The move comes as Somalia continues to rebuild its security institutions while navigating complex regional dynamics in the Horn of Africa and the Red Sea region. Mohamed Saido has more on this story.
Somalia's military cooperation agreement with Saudi Arabia comes at a time when the federal government is actively strengthening its defense partnerships. The agreement was discussed and signed in Riyadh during meetings between Somalia's Minister of Defense, Ahmed Maalim Fiqi, and Saudi Arabia's Defense Minister, Prince Khalid bin Salman, with discussions centered on defense cooperation, coordination, and capacity development. The talks took place as Somalia seeks to reinforce its security position amid shifting dynamics in the Horn of Africa and the Red Sea region. For Mogadishu, deepening military ties with key regional partners is part of a broader strategy to professionalize its armed forces, assert sovereignty, and anchor itself more firmly with regional security arrangements.
The National Independent Electoral Board has announced that regional elections will take place in April. The board says voter registration is expected to begin in cities including Baidoa, Johar, and Dusamareb, with plans to expand the process to 35 districts nationwide, including 12 new districts. Mohamed Saido with more on this story.
The National Independent Electoral Board's announcement builds on the momentum of regional elections already conducted in Banaadir in December, which marked the first phase of the current local electoral rollout. Those elections were presented as a test case for expanding the process to other parts of the country. The board now says preparations are underway to continue the process in additional regions, starting with voter registration in Baidoa, Johar, and Dusamareb, and expanding to 35 districts nationwide. Officials framed the April timeline as part of a gradual expansion strategy aimed at extending local elections beyond the capital while navigating political and logistical challenges.
Somalia's parliament has concluded debate on Chapter 4 of the Provisional Constitution with particular focus on Articles 49, 50, and 54. These articles address the federal system, relations between the central government and federal member states, and the structure of governance. The decision came after weeks of debates between the parliamentarians. With this phase completed, the constitutional review process now moves to the next stage. Mohamed Saido has more on this story.
Parliament's conclusion of debate on Chapter 4 of the Provisional Constitution follows weeks of intense political push and pull inside the legislature. The process was marked by disruptions to parliamentary sessions, temporary suspensions, and rising tensions among lawmakers over the direction of the amendment. At the center of the debate were Articles 49, 50, and 54, which define the federal system and the balance of power between the central government and federal member states. The standoff ultimately led to disciplinary measures, including the dismissal of 19 members of parliament between the chamber moved forward to conclude deliberations. With this phase complete, the constitutional review now advances, but political divisions remain close to the surface.
The Galmudug administration has confirmed that President Ahmed Abdi Kariye, known as Qorqor, met with international partners and donor representatives in Nairobi to discuss the worsening drought in the region. The meeting focused on mobilizing urgent support for drought-affected communities, particularly in areas facing water shortages, livestock losses, and increased displacement.
Galmudug President Ahmed Abdi Kariye, known as Qorqor, has taken the region's drought crisis directly to international partners through meetings held in Nairobi. The discussions focused on the worsening humanitarian situation caused by prolonged dry conditions affecting central Somalia. Communities across Galmudug are facing water shortages, loss of livestock, and rising displacement. Regional authorities say the Nairobi engagement was intended to accelerate support, improve coordination, and ensure drought response efforts move from assessment to concrete action on the ground.
A passenger aircraft has recently crashed during takeoff at Aden Abdullah International Airport in Mogadishu. The incident occurred shortly after departure, prompting an emergency response at the airport. Initial reports indicate that passengers and crew were safely evacuated, though the aircraft sustained damage. An investigation is underway to determine the cause of the crash, and we'll hear more on this story soon. And finally, Prime Minister Hamza Abdi Barre has conducted an inspection of services at Aden Abdullah International Airport, ordering improvements across key passenger services. Following the visit, the government announced the scrapping of the $30 yellow fever vaccination booklet fee, ending a charge that has drawn widespread complaints from travelers. Authorities say the decision is aimed at improving service delivery and preventing illegal fees at the country's main airport. That's it from us. Thank you for joining us, and we wish you a lovely evening.